Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
I'm going to, excuse me 1 second. I want to make sure I have I have the share here. A moment. And of course, this morning we're going to be looking at continuing our discussion of Genesis, right? Of that first section of Genesis. So here we are. We've actually, in the space of, this is our 5th week doing this. We're actually on verse 4. We're going, and in fact, we were already into verse 4 last time, and we'd gotten through a certain part of the Rashi about that initial light, which I can tell you still has a lot of puzzles for me to try. I mean, it's just so deep, and there's just so many different kinds of ways of looking at it, and it's just a lifetime, it seems to me, like a lifetime process of trying to deconstruct it and get a better sense of what that first light is. So let me review this verse, which we had actually done, but then we'll go to that second part of the Rashi. Vayar Elohim, God saw, et haor, the light, ki tov, how good it was. Vayavdel Elohim, and God separated off, bein haor uvein hachoshech, between the light and between the darkness. So this is where we were the last time when we left off. And the first part, just to refresh your memories perhaps, is how God had to take that initial light and then save it. He removed it and saved it for the righteous in the world to come. And this was a new thought that I had, that possibly that light represents immortality, the light of immortality. So, but Rashi goes on to say, so that's a midrash, right? But according to the basic meaning of this verse, this is the way we need to explain this verse. Ra'ahu, that is, God saw it, ki tov, how good it was, ve'ein na'eh lo v'lachoshech sheyu mishtamshim be'irbuvia, and it would not be appropriate or lovely for it, that is, for the light and for the darkness, that they should both serve mixed together. The kaval lazet chumo, and so he established for one its domain bayom, during the day. So you can see how day and light are not necessarily connected in the way we would understand them, but that daytime would be the domain of the light, the lazeh, and the domain of the darkness would be night. So I have to admit that while I think I basically understand what Rashi is telling us here, it isn't so simple to understand really and truly what's he saying, right? Other than the idea that there needed to be a separation, some kind of separation, and that's the Vayavdel, and that it talks about God separating off. So let me see if there is actually, let me look here, if that is a piece that we want to look at in terms of the, let me see. Okay. Well, this was just a lovely Torah Tamima that I looked at.
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
How can there be a separation of day and night when there's such a blend?
So we notice, and it's interesting, by the way, notice the word irbuvia. It's related to the word erev, and the word erev, which we translate as evening, actually has more of a connotation of mixture. So in the evening, there is a mixture of light and darkness. And in the morning, although morning is boker, which sounds to me like it has to do with the notion of light penetrating the darkness, but evening for sure is, and ma'ariv, those words, and the eruv, right, all has to do with blends, with blending. But evening is very brief, and maybe I'm misunderstanding your question. because we know that evening basically takes about an hour, but it's not the major time. So please, if I'm not understanding your question, please, give it another shot and I'll try and understand it better.
You gave me some lovely information. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So I was looking, this was just, I thought, really cool. Okay, saw how good it was, right? Saw how good the light was. Amar Rabbi Elazar, said Rabbi Elazar, Afilu bishvil tzaddik echad olam nivra. That even for the sake of one righteous person, the world was created. And I think that sort of what it does is it gives us an attitude, right? An ability to try to develop an attitude of appreciating righteousness in a very profound kind of way. That if there were only one righteous person, the world would be created, right? The world was created. Shne'emar, why? Because it says, Vayar Elohim et haor kitov, that God saw the light and how good the light was. And Rabbi Elazar is really playing with the syntax and a literary idea going on here, right? The ein tov elat tzaddik. And the truth is that the word tov is identical with the word, it's synonymous with righteous. Righteousness and light are synonymous. Shne'emar, as it states, and he's got a proof text from Isaiah chapter 3, Imru Tzaddik Kitov. Say how good the righteous is. And there we have the word tzaddik and the word tov. And the way you could understand the Hebrew here syntactically is that the righteous is good. And this is from Tractate Yoma in the Talmud. Yoma has to do with Yom Kippur, the day. Yoma means the day in Aramaic. So let's take a look and see what's going on here. So we've got Kaf Bet I need to look for. Okay. Darishka. So he expounds in this way. Mishum de b'sha'ar hayamin. Why does he do it here? He says, with the rest of the days, in other words, as we go through Genesis chapter 1, and it talks about how good God sees things, Ketiv vayar Elohim ki tov bistam. It just says God saw how good it was, how good it was, right? It doesn't mention it specifically. In other words, when God does these various acts of creation, and we're going to see how this phrase, God saw how good it was, is like a refrain through the creation. But when that refrain takes place, it doesn't say, how good the rakia was, or how good the dry land was, or whatever. It doesn't say that. It just says how good it was. That's all. La'achar kol briat hayom. So after each day's creation, God simply says, God saw how good it was. That's it. But kan, however, here it says, Itov bi'yichud al ha'or. But here it says, God saw how good the light was, and specifies the light. So look at the close reading, right? I mean, this is something, of course, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I never would have paid attention to that distinction between this first day and how God is saying it specifically about the light. And however, when it comes to the rest of the days, God isn't specific. The Torah is not specific. But that particular diuk, that particular point, right? Lachein, and for this reason, darech al derech remez ve'asmachta. And he says, and for this reason, Rabbi Elazar is willing to interpret it by way of allusion and intimation. In other words, he's not suggesting that this is the simple, straightforward meaning of the text, but rather that there's something more being said here because the text says or specifically, right? And that's why he goes and says, Ein tov elat tzaddik. There, that in fact, good is synonymous with righteous. V'habi'urhu al pi Haggadah, and he says, and to explain this further, by means of an Agadah, a midrashic tale or interpretation, shebidisha haba'ah, because in the next interpretation, in that he's going to quote later, or shebara hakadosh baruch hu bayom rishon, and this is the one I believe. Oh no, we haven't discussed this, right? He says the light which was created that the Holy One, blessed be He, created bayom rishon on this first day, Adam Sofer. A person can use this light to look out, Sofer, umabit bo, and is able to see through this light, misof ha'olam va'ad sofor, from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe. And this is an interpretation that I come across quite a few years ago and wondered to myself, is this the light of intelligence? And this kind of light means like the very essence of intelligence. But it's only a suggestion, right? I'm only making a suggestion, and I'm trying to play around with this particular interpretation and try to make sense of it. So, of course, you are welcome to play around with this too and think, what exactly? I mean, there's something being said that there is this kind of light that allows you to see from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe. And it certainly seems to be talking about the light of understanding, of knowledge, etc. V'kevan shenistakel hakadosh baruch hu b'dor hamabul. But once the Holy One, blessed be He, looked out at the generation of the flood, uvedor haflaga, and the generation of the division of the world into, remember the Tower of Babel story, that is the generation of haflaga, where God separated out nations. You may want to mute, please. If you can, please mute. So thank you. This is the generation of the Tower of Babel, where God separated them out into various languages. Shema asehem mekulkalim, that their actions were spoiled, were not good. Amad, and this is why Amad literally means to stand, but it means to take action, right? That God took action, the Ganzol Tzadikim, and He hid it away. He hid this light away for the righteous, La'atid Lavo, in the world to come. Shene'emar, how do we know this? Vayar Elohim et ha'or ki tov. God saw the light, and ki tov, right, again, can be understood as only for the good, right? That in fact God saw that the light should only be for the good, the ein tov ela tzadik. And when we talk about tov, again, we're using that interpretation of saying tov and the righteous are synonymous, etc. Beritzono lomar, and what he wants to say is, af ki acharei shalo matza et hadorot, even though after he was unable to find the generations re'uyim la'or zeh, worthy of this particular light, haya lo levat lo. In other words, it's saying it would be reasonable for God to have destroyed it. In other words, to get rid of it, get rid of this light, this original light, right? Because He saw that there were going to be generations that were wicked, and it could be that God could have actually gotten rid of the light altogether. Ach mipnei shera'a et ha'or shehu ra'ui lehibarei avur tzadik. Right? But because God saw that the light was worthy of being created on account of a righteous person, shenikra tov, because when it says tov, that is talking about a righteous person, lachen lo batlo elaganzor. And for this reason, He didn't simply get rid of it altogether, but He hid it away. Umevu'ar deru'ah bri'ah. And so for this reason, right, you can logically deduce deru'ah bri'ah miyuchedet lehibare, that it is that a specific creation was worthy of being created, avur tzaddik echad, for even one righteous person. And vedok means, I believe that's sort of just saying QED, QED. So just giving you a few different and deep, you see how deep this stuff can get. And of course, we are, I want to emphasize, scratching the surface. Scratching the surface. There is just so much that can be said about this, and that can, and of course, it's, I like to sometimes say, it's a well-plowed field. I'm going to keep going here. I'm looking to see. All right, let's just keep going. Onto the, actually the next verse, which we did not cover, is yes. Right. Vayikra Elohim la'or yom, God called the light day, v'lachoshech kara laila, right? And to the darkness he called night. Vahi erev, vahi voker, and there was evening and there was morning. Yom echad, one day. And there's going to be, we'll look at the Rashi on this. So, right, day one day. Yom echad, he says, he looks at this word Yom echad, and it jumps out. Lefi seder lashon haprasha. If we were to look at the order of this particular chapter, haya lo lichtov Yom Rishon. It shouldn't have said Yom Echad, which means one day, okay? That is a cardinal number. One is a cardinal number. It should have said the first day. And it doesn't, because it goes on to use ordinal numbers, right? And he's going to say, Kamosha katuv b'shar hayamim, just as is referred to and written in the rest of the days. The rest of the days are called Yom Sheni, which means second day. That's ordinal number. Doesn't say day 2, okay? It doesn't say day 3. It says Shlishi, which means third day. Rivi'i, fourth day. Lama katav echad. So why in this case are we writing echad? Why are we not saying rishon? And the answer is lefi shehaya hakadosh baruch hu yachid be'olamo, because at this particular time the Holy One, blessed be He, was alone in the universe. He was the one thing. He was he was the sole existence in his universe. Shelo nivra'u hamalachim, because the angels, malach, the angels were not created ad yom sheni, until the second day. Kach mefurash b'Bereshit Rabbah, and Rashi is giving his attribution. He says this is what is written in Bereshit Rabbah, the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, which is extant. It's a midrash roundabout, I'm going to guess, but it contains material, 6th century, something like that, maybe a little earlier. I'm not sure, but I think 6th century is about right about this. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll continue next week. And so I'm going to stop the share. Does anybody want to say anything before I stop the recording?